tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people. And I'll continue repeating it because I know that's the case.
New insight into the next steps in a cross-border trade war.
Tonight, the Premier talks tariffs, Doug Ford's promise to protect the province ahead of revealing the team leading the charge. Good evening. The Premier says he is working to make sure Canada is first in line for exemptions when the U.S. enacts tariffs on April 2nd.
The comments came today on the eve of his cabinet swearing in tomorrow. CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris joins us live with all the details. Siobhan.
Well, this is really the first time we have heard Doug Ford speak at some length since returning from that meeting in the Capitol last week. It was a 90-minute sit-down with federal officials plus U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and his team. Ford is emphasizing that meeting wouldn't have happened without his move to add a surcharge on electricity going to 3 U.S. states. Ford has been making an effort to be a little quieter since then. We did hear from leaders on both sides of the border that talk that the temperature needed to be lowered here. And the Premier says that discussion did focus on the next round of tariffs coming April 2nd. These are the reciprocal ones Donald Trump's been warning about for all of the U.S.'s trading partners.
What we're working at is making sure that we're first in line for exemptions. And we told the administration very clearly how we feel these tariffs are going to hurt the American people. Yes, it's going to hurt Canada, but it's going to hurt the American people.
The focus on this tariff fight will be a factor in the unveiling of Ford's new cabinet tomorrow. We don't expect a lot of changes in key economic portfolios, and Ford has already signaled after his re-election that he won't be scaling back the size. And back to you.
All right. Thank you, Siobhan. Still to come, efforts to keep the true North strong and free. Canada's Prime Minister is in Iqaluit. His plans for Arctic security later in the newscast. But first, outside the legislature, protesters descended on Queen's Park today. The battle over bike lanes ramping up once again.
Cyclists pleading their case to the province to hit the brakes on a plan to remove downtown bike lanes. CTV Sean Leithong joins us live. And Sean, this is a last-minute push.
It certainly is, Natalie. These protesters starting here and heading to an engineering firm this morning. The end result, police being called.
2 protesters were arrested after entering the offices of an engineering firm involved with the removal of bike lanes on major roads in Toronto.
They were arrested, they were ticketed, and they've been let go.
The group Fridays for Future Toronto organized the protest outside the office of Stantec Consulting this morning, calling on the firm to end their contract with the Ontario government.
They are an engineering group that is going to take the money that hits the table and completely ignore their own ethics.
The province moved to take away bike lanes along Bloor, Yonge and University in favor of restoring a lane of traffic last fall. At the same time, the province passed legislation effectively banning municipalities from adding certain new bike lanes and requiring provincial permission when a bike lane will take up a lane of traffic. In a statement, a representative from Stantec said they support the public's right to protest. Also, we're working with the Ministry of Transportation and City of Toronto staff to develop technical drawings that meet the city's engineering design standards for a small section of these bike corridors, approximately 1.5 kilometers. And after the technical drawings are complete, our participation on the overall project will be concluded.
In the middle of a trade war, Doug Ford is spending $50 million to make traffic worse, kill cyclists, harm our environment, and harm local businesses.
And now that there are bike lanes on major arteries, I feel a lot safer. I've had a lot less incidents where I nearly get side-doored or hit by a car.
In my view, when I'm out riding, especially at rush hour, the lanes are packed.
Riders heading south towards the Stantec offices after 8 a.m. It comes after cycling advocates lost a court challenge aiming to have the bike lane removal stopped. Now there's fear that the removal of the lanes could start as soon as 2 days from now.
I'm not against bike lanes. I'm just not.
This afternoon, Premier Ford said he's in support of building bike lanes on secondary roads, not major arteries.
When you have 1 and 1.5% of the people using the bike lanes and 70% of the people driving, I think this is a no-brainer. So we're going to continue moving forward.
Ford confirming the bike lanes will not be removed in 2 days, while the Ministry of Transportation would not give a specific removal date, saying it will happen in the coming weeks.
Now, what we don't know is if those removals will start before there is a charter challenge, which will be heard in court on April 16th. Reporting live, I'm Sean Leithong. Nathan and Natalie, back to you.
Thank you, Sean. And take a look at this.
That's doing about 200 eastbound on the 401.
All right, take a look. A police helicopter caught a vehicle traveling more than double the speed limit on the 401 in Whitby. This was on Thursday around 11:30 at night. Police say 2 vehicles were observed traveling at speeds more than 200 kilometers per hour. One was located near Taunton Road East and Highway 412. The 19-year-old driver was arrested and charged with careless driving and stunt driving.
Also tonight, keeping up with the coyotes. Experts weigh in on how to avoid the wild animals in Liberty Village following a string of frightening encounters with people and pets. That's just ahead.
We have more news in a moment, but first here's a live look at the city, and we're going to give you the live shot there. Comfortable evening, warm, feels much like spring, which is just a couple of days away, and another good-looking day is on the way tomorrow, so enjoy that if you can. Lindsay Morrison is here with a look at the current conditions. Lindsay.
And Nathan, I suggest that everyone enjoy this evening too, because it is fabulous out there. Beautiful sunshine. I'll step aside so you can see just how clear it is right now around the Golden Horseshoe. A little bit of cloud approaching from the west and northwest. A few showers around the Bruce Peninsula and snow impacting our friends in northern Ontario. So we are faring pretty well, all things considered. We've got a southwesterly wind. It's not overly strong. It's just enough to usher in some of that mild air. You know, we made it to a high of 16 degrees this afternoon, overachieving. It is still quite mild out there right now, but let me show you the difference between Pearson Airport at 14 degrees this hour and the Toronto Islands at 7 degrees. So already it is that time of year where we remind you that it's a little cooler by the lake. But again, still plenty of sunshine out there, and we are in for another very warm day tomorrow. Then, for the start of spring, we'll get into a few showers. A full look at your forecast is coming up. For now, Natalie, I'll send things over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Well, the city is stepping up efforts to address what it calls an unprecedented number of coyote attacks downtown.
Today, they revealed their plan of action, but will it be enough for residents in the Liberty Village and Fort York areas who say they're being terrorized by the wild animals? CTV's Beth McDonnell joins us live with the details. Beth.
Nathan, city officials believe there are 4 coyotes responsible for the rash of attacks in Liberty Village and Fort York. Residents have been fearful for months and want action. There are dog walkers and owners in Fort York and Liberty Village so scared they carry sprays and alarms just in case a coyote attacks. Some believe the city has been too slow responding to a rash of incidents, and relocating the coyotes months ago would have made sense.
A lot less attacks, for sure, 100%, a lot less fear.
Bylaw officers have been patrolling high-risk areas, and now the city is ramping up its coyote action plan. A 7-member wildlife panel recommends the city hire a company to assess the nuisance coyotes and apply aversion techniques. That people continue aversion techniques with their bodies and voices, add resources to recondition animals, remove human food sources, repair fences, improve lighting and sight lines, and increase education.
At this point, they are making the coyotes more important than the residents.
Ruby Cooner is with the Coyote Safety Coalition. Her dog Amber was attacked and died. She says it's one of 70 negative interactions the group has documented since November. Cooner doesn't want coyotes killed, but says there has been an exemption to move coyotes in the past and would have liked to see a more detailed plan with timelines.
We are disappointed. We've been facing this issue for 5 months, and it is escalating.
With the neighborhood near the rail corridor, the city says removed coyotes could come back to the area, among other problems.
There are risks with trapping, and those risks are dogs, children, people.
This is Kobe. She'd be a snack to a coyote.
Others believe city efforts are paying off.
What they're doing is certainly, I have noticed an improvement. I don't want to see any animal get displaced or hurt, but of course we want to keep our pets and humans and the community safe.
We will continue to work on this so that residents can feel safe in their community and that the city is well prepared to manage these situations.
The city says if aversion techniques by the new company don't work, it will look at euthanizing coyotes. City officials are vowing to put in the recommendations immediately. Reporting live, I'm Beth McDonnell. Nathan and Natalie, back to you.
Thank you, Beth. In Burlington, fire crews rescued a dog from a house fire. It happened on Bunton Crescent, just off Appleby Line. The pet was pulled from the home and given oxygen. No word on the extent of its injuries. No other injuries were reported. The cause of the fire is still under investigation.
Several schools in Scarborough were placed in hold and secure after a grass fire started spreading through a hydro corridor. There was concern about the smoke blowing towards the schools. This was in the Markham and Ellesmere area. Crews were able to put out the blaze, but as you can see, it did burn a large area of land.
And emergency crews in Oakville battled a fire at a car dealership overnight. They were called to Key Auto on Wycroft Road near 3rd Line and the 403 around 3:30 this morning. When they arrived, they found flames and heavy smoke pouring from the building. Officials say the cause of the blaze is under investigation, but is being considered suspicious.
We turn to the latest on a court ruling that could spell out the fate of Canada's oldest company.
Hudson's Bay facing serious financial problems, seeking an urgent plan to liquidate, but still in legal limbo. CTV's Mike Walker has been following this story and joins us now live with the latest. Mike.
Well, Hudson Bay intended on starting the liquidation process as early as today, but that's not happening yet as the court is yet to issue a ruling. This as discussions are continuing between stakeholders on unresolved issues, and customers are starting to notice some bare shelves.
From clearance signs to bare shelves, including the Bay's iconic Stripes brand, as a massive liquidation looms.
I hope for the staff that they'll be able to be safe, but the writing on the wall, I think it's really dire.
Hudson's Bay is waiting for a court decision on its liquidation request, but shoppers are already searching for bargains. Some high-end brands like Hugo Boss have already removed products.
It's not as busy as I thought it would be. You know, there's not really that many sales. I'm sure they're going to be coming soon.
The company intends to liquidate 80 Bay stores as well as Saks Fifth Avenue locations after it was unable to get financing. The company owes more than $1 billion to creditors and suppliers. Yesterday, a judge delayed a ruling, telling all parties to continue working on outstanding issues.
I think he really just has to make sure that the company isn't liquidating so fast that it rules out the possibility of some white knight coming to the table, whether that's a financing deal or someone coming to the table and saying, look, I want to buy the assets of the brand.
The process could mean Canada's oldest retail chain could shutter, putting as many as 9,000 jobs at risk. A lawyer representing employees and retirees opposes the immediate liquidation plans.
If all the stores are shut down and nothing gets acquired by another purchaser, then generally there's massive job loss, pension plan windups. It's the shutdown of a company.
The company is hoping some stores can be saved if it can secure additional funding. Lawyers representing landlords argued the liquidation process would create uncertainty and instability. The Bay is an anchor tenant at malls across the country.
It's too big for one retailer to fill in almost all cases. They're going to have to chop up the space and try to lease it out bit by bit.
The potential shutdown bittersweet for shoppers.
It's a tradition, and it's a magnificent department store, which we don't have anymore.
Who for some time feared this day would come.
When you have escalators that don't work and you have things that in the store that aren't adequately taken care of, yeah, it's going to go down.
Now, we're just hearing from the judge in this case who notes that significant progress is being made by all stakeholders on the outstanding issues, and he will allow those discussions to continue. This case will be back in court tomorrow. Reporting live, I'm Mike Walker. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. To economic concerns now over a sudden spike in inflation in Canada.
The increase revealed today and came as the federal government's temporary GST tax break came to an end. CTV's Scott Lightfoot reports on what it could mean for your wallet.
It was expected to increase, but not by this much.
It's clearly a disappointing inflation report for Canada. It does confirm that inflation seems to be picking up a little bit.
The annual rate of inflation grew to 2.6% in February. That marks a sizable jump from the 1.9% increase seen in January. The difference attributed in large part to the temporary tax break that ended mid-February. The Consumer Price Index shows the rise in things like travel prices, which were up nearly 19%, grocery costs up almost 3%, and shelter costs up more than 4%.
Yeah, you're going to see a slight increase
increases in some of the items you buy at the grocery store because now you've got the GST or HST back on it. And again, we've seen prices at the pumps increase, and that's going to squeeze family budgets a little bit. But overall, I mean, this is a sort of a normal seasonal change otherwise.
StatsCan says without the sales tax break, the inflation rate probably would have grown to 3% last month. The unexpected jump may complicate the Bank of Canada's plans to set its benchmark interest rate.
We probably will see inflation perhaps tick up further in March because we'll see a further adjustment to this expiration of this partial sales tax holiday that month. So the Bank of Canada will have to play it pretty careful over the next few months.
Now the focus turns to what effect U.S. tariffs and counter tariffs could have on the rate of inflation going forward.
You're going to have some of that 25% tariff or whatever the level is that is going to be passed on and going to find its way into producer prices, but also eventually into consumer prices. And I think that's what we're likely going to see in the months ahead.
Scott Lightfoot, CTV News.
From France to the UK to Canada's far north.
Prime Minister Mark Carney ended a jam-packed 48 hours with a visit to Iqaluit, making moves to boost Canada's Arctic security. CTV's Michael Couture reports.
With much of the focus on securing Canada's southern border with the United States, Prime Minister Mark Carney came north to send that same message of sovereignty, while at the same time announcing an increased presence of Canada's military in Iqaluit. Carney announced the allocation of $6 billion in a partnership with Australia for an over-the-horizon radar system that can provide early warning coverage from the Canada-U.S. border all the way up to the Arctic. The Canadian officials who briefed reporters described the system as the most sophisticated available. It's able to detect hypersonic missiles, and this system could be in place by 2029. In the meantime, the Prime Minister says Canada does need to increase military spending.
We will need to do more. We will do it deliberately. We will do it in a way that gets effective value for money.
The Canadian government is also spending $253 million to upgrade power plants, accelerate housing, and to help complete the first phase of a hydroelectricity facility in Nunavut. Carney also announced an enhanced year-round presence of the Canadian Armed Forces in the Arctic. Right now, the military has year-round operations in Alert here in Nunavut, but there will be other locations that have yet to be determined. Speaking on background, officials told reporters the partnership with Australia shouldn't be seen as a slight to the Americans, as the U.S. military approves of the radar system. But it's unclear what the reaction will be from Donald Trump. Now, today's announcement was already part of a larger plan to modernize NORAD, so it won't move the needle on Canada's plan to hit its NATO targets. Michael Couture, CTV News, Iqaluit.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister faced more questions about his finances following a terse exchange with reporters on Monday. Mark Carney's refused to reveal what assets went into a trust, but insists he's following all the rules. CTV's Rachel Aiello has the details.
So they've been disposed.
Prime Minister Mark Carney was pressed again today to proactively disclose details about the assets he has divested into a blind trust.
What happens is that there's a discussion with the Ethics Commissioner for certain screens around certain issues, and that's a process that is underway.
This after a testy back and forth with reporters on the topic yesterday.
What potential conflicts of interest
what
you sought
possible
to avoid?
conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules.
That was an exchange Conservatives pounced on today.
The question is, why is he so defensive when he's asked?
Canada's conflict of interest rules state the Prime Minister is not allowed to own controlled assets, such as stocks or bonds, whose value could directly or indirectly be affected by government decisions or policy. The rules require he divest by either selling or placing them in a blind trust. The Federal Ethics Commissioner's office confirms Carney has been in touch. In a statement, a spokesperson said Carney has 60 days to disclose to the commissioner all his assets, liabilities, income, and outside activities, and that the office would also work with him on publishing a summary of his personal and financial information within 120 days.
I'll speak to you after.
But as reporters have pressed him on, 120 days could very likely be after the federal election.
Assets that are placed in a blind trust are known to the office holder until they are liquidated. So for whatever length of time that is, a blind trust is not really blind.
Shedding some light on the Prime Minister's past holdings, Brookfield Asset Management's latest annual report shows that before he quit to launch his leadership bid, Carney held $6.8 million in stock options at his former firm. Today, he vowed to remove himself from any decisions related to that firm. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has been shattered by deadly airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. Palestinian health authorities say more than 400 people have been killed. The strikes hit homes and tent encampments from the north to the south of the territory. Witnesses reported that Israeli tanks also shelled from across the border. Israel's prime minister says he ordered the strikes because Hamas had rejected proposals to secure a ceasefire extension and pledged to step up military action. But Hamas accused Israel of jeopardizing efforts to negotiate a permanent deal. The Israelis say the military operation in Gaza will continue in the days ahead. Egypt and Qatar condemned today's assault, and the European Union says it deplores the breakdown of the ceasefire. The United Nations says it was horrified and vows to continue working toward 3 crucial goals.
First, for the ceasefire to be fully respected. Second, for humanitarian aid to have access to Gaza in an unimpeded way. And third, for the unconditional release of hostages. And we will not give up on these objectives.
Protests and rallies have continued in Israel as Hamas still holds 59 of the approximately 250 hostages taken during the attack on October 7th, 2023.
The latest now on American efforts to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Moscow has agreed to a U.S. proposal to pause attacks against Ukrainian energy facilities. The announcement was made following a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. The U.S. president posted a message on his Truth Social platform that reads in part, "We agree to an immediate ceasefire on all energy and infrastructure with an understanding that we will be working quickly to have a complete ceasefire and ultimately an end to this very horrible war between Russia and Ukraine." Many elements of a contract for peace were discussed, including the fact that thousands of soldiers are being killed, and both President Putin and President Zelensky would like to see it end. That process is now in full force and effect, and we will hopefully, for the sake of humanity, get the job done. Trump has proposed a full 30-day ceasefire, which Ukraine has already accepted, but Vladimir Putin stopped short of agreeing to that today. The Kremlin says the Russian military has been ordered to stop attacks against energy sites.
Ukraine says it would support the U.S. proposal to halt strikes on energy infrastructure. The Ukrainian president says the right course of action for his country now would be to have a conversation with Trump to find out details about what was discussed in today's phone call. Volodymyr Zelensky has said Europe must be part of any peace talks and Moscow must surrender the territory it has seized. But he is skeptical that Putin is ready for peace as Russian forces are advancing in Ukraine's east and pushing back Ukrainian troops from the Kursk region.
2 NASA astronauts are finally back on Earth after an unscheduled 9 months in orbit.
We're going to stand by for splashdown located in the Gulf of America off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
A capsule carrying Butch Wilmore, Sonny Williams, and 2 other astronauts arrived less than a half an hour ago, bringing their unplanned odyssey to an end. They flew home aboard a SpaceX capsule that undocked from the International Space Station early today. The 2 veteran test pilots were supposed to be at the ISS for about a week, but problems with their Boeing Starliner made it too risky for the return journey. Wilmore and Williams ended up spending 286 days in space, 278 days longer than anticipated. They circled Earth more than 4,500 times and traveled 195 million kilometers by the time they splashed down, make that 3 minutes before 6 o'clock.
Still to come tonight on CTV News, allegations of inaction and chronic neglect. An Ontario Teachers Union blasts the province over funding for special education. That's coming up.
And I'm Pat Foran. Coming up on Consumer Alert, the backlog at Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board has improved, but there are still delays for anyone seeking a hearing. One landlord says he is owed $25,000 in unpaid rent, and his tenant refuses to pay or move out. All of that story, that's just ahead.
Another warm day on tap for tomorrow. The big difference is we are expecting a little more in the way of cloud cover, especially in the morning, followed by some clearing tomorrow afternoon. Then Thursday, we're going to get into a little bit of wet weather. It's not a lot, but we could see a change over to some flurries in some areas. And then we're in for a big cool down over the weekend. A full look at your forecast is coming up, and stay with us. We've got another full night of great shows for you right here on CTV.
During the pandemic, there were massive backlogs at Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board. It could take as long as a year to get a hearing.
Well, the board can now hear a case within 3 to 6 months. Landlords say some tenants are still abusing the system. Pat Foran has the story on Consumer Alert. Pat.
Thanks, Natalie and Nathan. The landlord says he's had problems with tenants not paying the rent, and he's tried 3 times to have them evicted, but each time they appealed. Now the case is before the courts, and he has no idea when or if they'll have to move out. Mooney Chad Latchman of Brampton bought this house for his children, but decided to rent it out for a few years before they moved in. Now he has tenants that won't pay the rent or move out.
This looks like this is a professional tenant.
Latchman says he's had issues with the tenants over the past 4 years, and he's been before the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board to evict them 3 times. Each time there's been an appeal, and now that the appeal process has been exhausted, they decided to go to court.
When I asked for my rent, he said, you know, we are in court. So if we are in court, you don't have to pay.
Latchman says he's currently owed $25,000 in back rent. He says he's stuck paying the mortgage, property taxes, and some utility bills.
I have to continue paying the mortgage. I sell my RSP to keep the mortgage going. He's not paying a nickel.
Even though a judge told the tenants they must pay $5,000 in January and another $6,000 last month, they ignored it. They also ignored our phone calls. We're here with your landlord. He says you haven't been paying the rent and you owe him about $25,000. Latchman says he's fed up and wants out.
I give up. I want to get out of it. No more.
These are just massive tactics that these tenants are using because the times are tough. They're now resulting into abusing the system.
Ontario Landlords Watch, an advocacy group for landlords, says the system needs to change to deal with tenants who are exploiting the rules.
There's no reason for someone to stay in someone's unit that long and not be able to make any type of payment arrangements.
Latchman says he'll never be a landlord again and worries his tenants will stay in his home many months longer and never pay the rent they owe.
He come here and tell my wife, this case will be for years before you enter in court. I have enough of it. I cannot continue.
And according to its website, the Landlord and Tenant Board says it's working to improve its service timelines. Last year, it scheduled over 105,000 hearings and resolved almost 100,000 cases. It's the most cases it's dealt with in its history. On your side, I'm Pat Foran.
If you have a consumer story idea, email us at alert@ctv.ca.
Okay, let's talk about the forecast. We're 2 days away from the start of spring. We've got double-digit temperatures and lots of sun. Thinking it might be safe to put away the parka.
Yeah, what more can you add? No more need for hats and gloves. I do worry that it could come back with, you know, goes out like a lion, as they say.
Yes.
A vengeance, but right now I'm feeling good.
We are all feeling good right now. I don't want to tell anyone to not put the parka away just yet. However, as we know, March can be a fickle month. The swings of spring are in full effect, as early as this week. In fact, this weekend we are in for a bit of a cool down. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's focus on today. What a day it has been. A terrific Tuesday. Nice one to maybe head out for a run. This was the scene at Rouge Beach earlier today. A beautiful day to be out by the water. Maybe, not a parka in sight today. It was very comfortable. We ended up climbing, overachieving, in fact, to our daytime high of 16 degrees. We were forecasting closer to about 12. It was, however, cooler by the water, so you may have noticed that if you're joining us from the shoreline of Lake Ontario. But notice that it is still 18 degrees this hour in Windsor, 12 degrees in Trenton, and 7 in Ottawa. Overnight tonight, we dropped to a low near 5 degrees in Toronto. That's actually our average daytime high at this time of year. So that should put things into perspective of just how mild it is. And here's a bit of a repeat. 16 is what we're forecasting for tomorrow's high, maybe 19 degrees in Niagara Falls, 16 in the Peterborough area. And while not in the teens, double digits in Aurora. 10 is what we're calling for you. Now, we have to mention what's happening just a little further north in through north central sections of Ontario. There are winter storm warnings in place. In fact, Timmins could pick up 20 to 40 centimeters of snow over the next couple of days here. This is what's happening. We've got a low pressure system swinging through. That's what's going to bring some snow to the central parts of our province. But for us, it's just going to be a few showers, not looking at anything significant at this point as far as rainfall accumulation. Maybe a couple of millimeters, might see more across southwestern Ontario or closer to Lake Huron, for example. Here's tomorrow, though. The daytime hours expected to be dry, but cloudier. There's about 9 a.m. As we make our way into the afternoon, that cloud is expected to break up, so we will enjoy periods of sunshine. We'll look forward to that because Thursday looks to be a mostly cloudy day. We'll get into some showers overnighted into the early morning hours. So there's about 6 a.m. You might consider bringing the umbrella with you as you head out the door. It's not a washout by any means. The majority of the day, in fact, is going to be rain-free, but showers, the potential for them continue into the evening hours, and then we might see a few flurries on the backside of this departing low as the temperature starts to cool. It's not our only cool down over the next 7 days. Look what happens into the weekend. So Thursday night, we go to about -5 degrees, but we're back up around 9 for a high on Friday under mostly sunny skies. Then Saturday, chance of showers, overnight low -9 degrees, and then Sunday's daytime high near 2. So that's a bit of a difference compared to the last few days here. Lots of sunshine, and then yes, maybe a little bit of mixing as we make our way into the early part of next week with temperatures very much bang on seasonal. That's your weather for now. Nathan, over to you.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. Still ahead on CTV News, luck of the Irish for a GTA dancer. A performer from Peel stars in Riverdance on a hometown stage. Our Andrea Case has her success story just ahead.
There are concerns tonight about the state of special education in this province.
The union representing elementary school teachers in Ontario says students with disabilities aren't being given the tools they need to succeed. CTV's Janice Golding has the details.
I love you, my mom. I love you too, buddy. You're the best.
Like any loving parent, Nadia wants what's best for her daughter. Leanna has Down syndrome, but the 7-year-old's needs aren't always being met by the education system.
It seems to be a wild west of services that everyone has a very different experience.
What's there? Are you digging a hole?
Leanna needs speech therapy, but
she's been on a wait list for 2.5 years now for a speech language service that is funded through the school boards that others have been on the beginning of JK. So there's quite a discrepancy there.
Leanna's story is far from unusual, which is why the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario is calling out the province in a new report called Promises Unfulfilled, which highlights what it calls alarming funding gaps in special education.
The right to an education that enables every child to reach their full potential is not just a promise, it is the law. But this government has failed to uphold the law.
The report points out challenges like a lack of early intervention, barriers to accessing programs, limited support services, as well as increasing school violence due to unmet student needs.
The complex needs of students continues to increase, while the resources available to support them well are almost non-existent. As a teacher, I am far too familiar with what it's like to evacuate a class due to physical and/or emotional violence.
EDFO stresses 3 quick fixes to improve the funding formula. First, by indexing special education funding to inflation. Second, EDFO says the statistical funding model needs to be adjusted given a large portion is based on census data from almost 20 years ago. Lastly, EDFO says an assessment backlog needs to be addressed, saying nearly 60% of students receiving special education assistance have not been assessed by an identification, placement and review committee. In response, the Minister of Education says special education supports have increased every year, adding by the end of 2025, funding is projected to total almost $4 billion, the highest amount of special education funding ever provided, and a 31% increase from the previous Liberal government. We have also added over 9,000 education workers, including 3,500 education assistants to support teachers, parents, and students with special education needs. Woo! Still, Nadia says the supports aren't good enough because without much needed speech therapy, her daughter won't be able to communicate her needs.
She closes down, and often children with Down syndrome, if they're not able to communicate and advocate for themselves, then they kind of get lost in the crowd.
Janice Golding, CTV News.
Peel Public Health is investigating another case of measles. The health agency says the measles case was confirmed on Friday. Health officials are warning residents of possible exposures in several locations, including the Hazel McCallion Central Library on March 7th, Multi-Specialty Med Clinic from March 8th to 9th, a Boot Health Group on March 10th, and the Credit Valley Hospital Emergency Room on March 11th. This information is listed on our website. Public Health Ontario says a total of 350 cases of measles have been reported in the province since last October.
The tensions between Canada and the U.S. have been fodder for some late-night talk shows in the U.S., and that includes Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, who had this to say about one of our biggest stars in Hollywood.
Well, listen to this. A French politician has demanded that the U.S. return the Statue of Liberty because the Trump administration is siding with the tyrants. Yeah. France wants the Statue of Liberty back, while Canada's like, well, in that case, we're coming to get Ryan Gosling. That's right. We're taking him back. Give him back. We need Ryan Gosling.
The White House dismissed the French politician's demand that Lady Liberty be returned. The statue has already been declared a World Heritage Treasure and is U.S. government property.
All over the world, when you think of Irish dancing, one word comes to mind: Riverdance.
That's right. This week, the celebration of Irish dance and so much more is once again drawing in audiences in Toronto. And for one dancer, this stop on the tour is special. CTV's Andrea Case has the story.
5, 6, 7, stand.
I'm always up for a challenge, but I'm not about to quit my day job. A few easy steps of Riverdance choreography has me out of breath. Imagine an entire show.
Harder than it looks.
It's nothing for Bolton's Tara Rochester. After her first Irish dance class at around 7 years old, she quickly fell in love with the genre.
It was simply just an advertisement in the newspaper. My parents saw it. I thought this would be fun for a young, energetic kid to start, so signed me up, and I've been in it ever since.
Years later, she saw a production of Riverdance in Toronto.
I was about 10 years old, so my mom took my sister and I to see the show in Edinburgh Rivers Theatre, where the shows are actually going to be this entire week. From the start, though, I absolutely loved it.
From child dancer to three-time champion, then auditions led her to being a cast member of Riverdance.
So I've been to Dubai, all around Europe, China, and most recently Taiwan.
And now Toronto. Just after St. Patrick's Day, it's a great time for the show, which is celebrating 30 years to be here.
In the show, there's contemporary, we have dervish dancers, American tap dancers. Again, Riverdance is about celebrating culture, not just Irish dancing. And I think it truly does that through the different art forms.
The dancers kept busy offstage too, working for the town of Caledon.
It is a hard balance. I absolutely love the dance and I would love to do it as long as I can. But work is also very supportive of that, and they understand what the opportunity means to me and just the greater picture of life, and that you have to take these opportunities while you have them. So I'm very thankful to that.
Riverdance is on stage now at the CAA Theatre at 651 Yonge Street until Sunday, March 23rd. Andrea Case, CTV News.
Coming up, cashing in on top tickets. Toronto City Hall looks to make millions on World Cup soccer seats through resale revenue. We'll explain just ahead.
What we're working at
is making sure that we're first in line for exemptions. And we told the administration very clearly how we feel these tariffs are going to hurt the American people.
Updating our top stories now, Ontario's premier says a surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S. is still a possibility. Doug Ford removed the surcharge last week after Donald Trump threatened to double steel and aluminum duties. But the premier says he doesn't want to antagonize the Americans.
They are an engineering group that is going to take the money that hits the table and completely ignore their own ethics.
A protest was held outside of the offices of an engineering firm involved with the removal of bike lanes on some major Toronto roads. The demonstrators want the contract with the Ontario government to end. The premier says he's in favor of building bike lanes on secondary roads.
I think he really just has to make sure that the company isn't liquidating so fast that it rules out the possibility of some white knight coming to the table.
No decision from the judge yet on a request from Hudson's Bay to liquidate 80 of its stores, as well as Saks Fifth Avenue locations. The company has been unable to get financing, but is hoping some stores can be saved if it can secure additional funding.
Remember to keep up to date day and night at ctvnewstoronto.ca and by downloading the CTV News app.
On the markets, the Canadian dollar was down a fraction to 69.96 U.S. cents. Western Canadian Select was at $56.57, up 17 cents. And the TSX Composite ended at 24,706.07, down just over 79 points.
The Business Report is brought to you by Canadian Western Bank, the bank built for business.
The city's already spent millions of dollars to bring the World Cup to Toronto and is now considering a plan to spend money up front to buy tickets with the expectation of making a major profit. But as CTV's Rahim Ladani reports, some feel it's a risky move.
In 450 days, the FIFA World Cup will kick off in Toronto. And the city wants to spend money to make money.
We're confident that this will be a revenue-generating opportunity for us as a city.
The city's FIFA subcommittee is recommending council take $10.8 million out of the city's reserve fund to buy World Cup tickets, suites, and lounges. Its partner, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, would then sell them as packages to deep-pocket corporations. And the city hopes it will be at a significant premium.
Either FIFA and their official sales agent on location will be selling these packages, or the city can. And so we want to take advantage and not leave any money on the table.
The cost of hosting 6 World Cup matches is pegged at $380 million, of which the city is on the hook for $180 million. The committee is confident the reserve fund will be paid back in full by the first quarter of 2026 and will not impact the overall budget. But the strategy is sparking trepidation.
The fact that Toronto is in the game of reselling tickets, and that's part of our revenue strategy for FIFA, that's a little bit of a concern.
Another concern is the unknown of how much money the city will actually make. FIFA hasn't revealed which teams will be taking the pitch in Toronto, and that may also impact the bottom line.
We all know that for the Maple Leafs, they charge vastly different ticket prices depending on who's coming to town. So do we break even? Do we make money? Or do we actually lose money?
While the FIFA World Cup subcommittee has approved this recommendation, it isn't a done deal just yet. City Council will have its chance to debate it next week. Rahim Ladani, CTV News.
The Toronto Raptors are looking to regroup after a rough night on the court in Phoenix.
Robinson, easy, like just easy. It went right through the Suns that time.
Toronto led at the end of the first quarter, but the Suns came back to win 129-89. 7 Phoenix players scored in double figures. The Raptors visit the Golden State Warriors on Thursday.
Nylander with a shot blocked, the stinger off Anderson. Matthews gets it. He scores! Austin Matthews!
The captain had 2 goals and an assist as the Maple Leafs doused the Flames 6-2 last night. Toronto had lost 5 of their last 6 games, but they're now 2 points out of first place in the Atlantic Division. The Buds host Colorado tomorrow.
And that was the first hit of the new baseball season. Shohei Ohtani would also get a double as the Dodgers beat the Cubs 4-1 today. The MLB opener was played in Tokyo, with local fans thrilled to see Ohtani and other Japanese players in action. The two teams play again tomorrow night before returning to the U.S.
Still to come, lighting up the night. Ontario Place gets a glow up with a new outdoor exhibition. We'll reveal the Trillium Park transformation after the break.
Tonight, Trump and Putin's high-stakes call about ending the war in Ukraine.
The return to intense fighting in Gaza has been fully coordinated with Washington.
As a fragile Middle East ceasefire falls apart. That's later on CTV National News.
A free interactive outdoor art exhibit has returned to Trillium Park at Ontario Place.
And it is set to light up the night sky. Lumiere, the Art of Light, features 14 installations by local artists. Each one lights up, displaying unique, one-of-a-kind artwork to be enjoyed during the day and the night. The theme this year is Neon Dreams, Light and Color.
My inspiration for this was really creating something that will evolve throughout the day, something that kind of talks about how the difference in setting can influence the difference in how we show up as people. So I wanted an object that read as one thing during the day and then something that evolves into something completely different once the nighttime comes.
Lumiere, the Art of Life, runs from dusk until 11 p.m. each day until April 4th.
And a quick correction to our story on Riverdance. Now, we said the wrong location in our report. It's actually playing at the CAA Ed Mervish Theatre at 244 Victoria Street. That's important.
Good to know when you go see the show.
Yeah, you know what? It looked great, and I was impressed with Andrea doing the dance steps.
Me too.
More impressed with the weather forecast.
Yeah, we're all dancing because we're happy about what's happening here weather-wise. So here's a look at tonight's lows. Not so low, in fact, across southern Ontario. 5 is what we're forecasting here locally. That's usually our average daytime high. Now, of course, it is maple syrup season. We need overnight lows to be a little bit cooler than this in order for the sap to be flowing. Here's your maple syrup forecast for tomorrow. It's going to be another warm one. And then as we make our way beyond that toward the weekend, more favorable conditions for getting the sap flowing. The weekend certainly looks cooler. Nathan and Natalie.
Thank you, Lindsay. Be sure to join Todd Vanderheyden tonight at 11 for CTV National News, followed by Zoraida Allman with our next local newscast at 11:30.
In the meantime, our coverage continues anytime on CP24 and at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Lindsay Morrison and all of us here at CTV News, thank you for watching. Have a good night.
Sorry.